Salutations, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 30 of the one they call Broccoli. But as always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 30, Friend or Mortal Enemy? Chapter summary. Broccoli comes home expecting his dad's, only to come face to face with the intruder, Shinso. Shinso just wants the green cat to love him. Broccoli wants to be left alone. The Vestiges want to have some fun. And what is going on at UA? Author's notes. Hello, everyone. So it's been, checks calendar, over 5 months? Oh, damn. Okay, yeah, it's def been a while, huh? I'm really sorry about having been gone for so long. Life's been a lot. I graduated college, moved cities, got a job, and have just been overall very busy and stressed AF. My headspace hasn't also been the best, and it sort of shows in the overall mood for this chapter. So, read the trigger warning and be safe. But now that I've mostly finished unpacking, I hope to get back to some sort of semi-regular uploading schedule, cause I miss writing a lot. It won't be consistent though, like in the past, since I work irregular hours, but you will hopefully never have to go this long without update again. Since it's been a while, I just wanted to add a little guide on who knows what in this story, since Izuku's and Broccoli's lives are pretty tangled at the moment, lol. Here we go, a list on who knows what so far. Shinso knows about the ghosts, but not one for all. The Vestiges can interact with him, but he can't see or hear them. He has no idea that Izuku and Broccoli are the same person. Bakugo knows that he is Aizawa's cat. Izuku tried to tell him about One For All and the ghosts at the start of UA, but Bakugo obviously didn't believe him. Todoroki and Ida knows about Izuku's cat form and that he lives with Aizawa and All Might, though they think he is living with them as a human, not as their pet cat. They don't know about One For All. Aizawa and All Might knows about One For All and the ghosts, but they are clueless about his cat form or how the kid is already living with them. Nezu and Gran Torino knows about One For All, the ghosts, and that he is All Might's and Aizawa's cat. These are the only ones who currently know everything but are keeping it a secret out of respect for Izuku, though they are definitely laughing at the ridiculous situation their former students are in. That's everyone. I'll probably do more upnotes like this in the future. Trigger warning: dissociation, fear of abandonment, self-hatred, anxiety, unfair hate towards Shinso. Broccoli's point of view. When Broccoli arrived home that evening, he had hoped to maybe get to spend some time with Toshi or Shota. After all, it had been a long training on him, and he just wanted next to his dad. So imagine his disappointment when he stepped paw in the living room and, instead of his dad's, he came face to face with the intruder, Shinso. Before he could stop himself, Broccoli was already letting out a loud growl, his back arching as he glared at the teen in front of him. Shinso startled at the sound of his growl, almost falling off the couch as he turned around to see where the noise was coming from. Once Shinso saw it was just him, though, the boy visibly, and annoyingly, relaxed, before giving him an awkward smile and a wave. "Oh, you're back," Shinso said, sounding surprised, which just pissed Broccoli off even more, since this was his home. Sure, he hadn't been here much lately, but still, it was his! It also didn't help that Slushy, the traitor, was sleeping beside Shinso and looking completely relaxed and okay with the situation. When Broccoli didn't do anything or other than glare at him, Shinso grew more and more uncomfortable. He could even see a few sweat drops forming on his brow. "So, how was your day?" "Oh, never mind." The teen awkwardly trailed off as Broccoli walked straight past him with a huff. He could hear a quiet, "Good talk," being muttered as he left the room. But Broccoli ignored him in favor of looking for his dad's. He had a mission, after all. And he didn't have time for some stupid one-sided chit-chat with the dad stealer. After checking all the living rooms and letting out a few questioning meows, but still not seeing any signs of his dad's, Broccoli defeatedly dragged himself back to the living room and glared at Shinso. "If you're looking for Aizawa-sensei and Yagi-san, then they're not here. They had to rush over to UA for some important meeting. Said they'd be home later, Shinso explained stiffly, looking uncomfortable the more he talked. Broccoli slumped in disappointment but gave a small nod to show he had heard. Not seeing any reason to stay here any longer, he started heading over to go and take a nap in the office or something. Wait, Shinso blurted out, voice oddly urgent. And despite how he wanted nothing more than to go and take a nap, Broccoli turned around to give Shinso a blank stare, deciding to humor the team for now. Do you, um, want some dinner? Shinso asked nervously. It's just, well, they weren't sure how long they would be gone, but told me to give you something to eat if they weren't home before you. The teen continued awkwardly. At the mention of food, Slushy had woken up and was now headbutting Shinso's side, dragging a small smile from the boy. Broccoli tilted his head, considering the offer. Truth be told, he was a little hungry, but to be fed by Shinso? That, well, it felt a bit weird, especially considering how Izuku could very well turn back into a human if they were alone and take care of both himself and Slushy just fine. He didn't need Shinso for this. But he really didn't have much choice since he couldn't transform with the teen here. So, in the end, his hunger won out, and Broccoli decided to push away what little dignity he had left in order to eat. If that meant letting his obvious classmate feed him, if that meant letting his oblivious classmate feed him, then so be it. Without giving an answer, Broccoli simply headed over to the kitchen, waiting for Shinso to follow him, which the teen hesitantly did. And of course, Slushy came rushing after them, excited for food. Despite how awkward it felt to have his classmate make him food, it was admittedly a bit amusing seeing Shinso so nervous about getting everything right. It was honestly kind of sweet how hard he tried for such a simple task. The boy was double reading what looked like a hastily scribbled list before measuring the food 3 times until he finally gave them their food. By that point, one could believe that Slushy was starving based on how loud she was meowing. There we go. Enjoy, I guess? Shinso huffed out, a small smile on his face as he put down the bowls. Slushy immediately ran headfirst into the bowl, causing a few pieces to fly away, only to get picked up by an amused-looking Shinso. Broccoli rolled his eyes at the scene and started eating, keeping an eye on the teen so he wouldn't try and get too close. Thankfully, Shinso soon stood up, leaving the 2 cats to eat in peace as he started preparing his own dinner. Curiosity taking over, Broccoli paused his eating to look at what Shinso was going to eat, only for a wave of jealousy to wash over him at the sight of what looked like a bowl of leftover katsudon in Shinso's hands. Come to think of it, when was the last time Izuku had eaten katsudon? Probably back when his mom still cooked food for him? Was it even his favorite anymore? It definitely smelled delicious. He hadn't even noticed how he had been staring, much less how he was practically drooling at the thought of eating such delicious smelling food. But then his eyes met Shinso, who was giving him a sheepish smile as he went to sit at the table. Sorry, this isn't cat food, and I'm pretty sure Aizawa would skin me alive if I fed you anything that wasn't on his list. The teen apologized, while gesturing to a list on the fridge that sounding genuinely like he felt bad for him, which just opened a whole new can of worms for Broccoli, because he did not need some sort of pity thrown his way. He was being fed, and that was more than enough. With a huff, Broccoli turned back to his own food and did his best not to outright glare at Shinso every time the boy took a bite of the delicious-looking food. He shook his head because, again, he did not need anything more. This was already more than enough. But still, he couldn't help being curious about what his dad's katsudon tasted like. It must be a recent recipe they learned, since he'd never had it while training for UA. Would it be rude to ask them for a lunchbox, despite UA offering free lunch? It probably would be, right? He wasn't their only student anymore. They had lots of other teens to look out for. Him being All Might's successor hardly made him anything special. After all, didn't Shinso being here instead of him prove that? Suddenly, not feeling hungry anymore, Broccoli left the kitchen, ignoring the way Slushy immediately jumped at the rest of his food, or the way Shinso watched him worriedly as he went. It was getting late, and there was still no sign of his dad's. And although he didn't want to admit it, Broccoli was starting to get a bit worried. He wasn't used to being home before them, especially this late. Was this how they felt when I didn't get home? Broccoli tried his best not to worry about it too much. After all, they were probably just being held up at that UA staff meeting that Shinso had told him about, and he knows from experience how long Nezu can talk. Still, he was curious what the meeting could possibly be about for it to go on for this long. After having sulked in his dad's room for an hour and getting tired of Shinso and Slushy constantly checking in on him, Broccoli had eventually retreated back out to the living room. He'd climbed up to the top of the climbing tree and laid on the highest platform. That way, he could keep an eye on both the front door for when his dad came home, but he could also keep a tab on the intruder. Speaking of the intruder, Shinso was back on the couch, fiddling with something small and metallic. The teen was muttering to himself as he kept turning the thing around in his hands, a pair of batteries on the table in front of him and Slushy lazing in his lap. Come on, it should be here somewhere, he muttered, before there was a click and a proud aha. Curiously, Broccoli opened his eyes, and immediately found all of his senses being locked on a small, moving red dot on the floor. Inside their shared mind, the vestiges started snickering, which made Broccoli snap out of his daze and shake his head aggressively. He took a deep breath, willing his raging instincts to calm down. He was not going to fall for such a cheap trick again. But then the dot started moving up his climbing tree, and Broccoli's mind blinked out as he threw himself down at the intruding pest. There was loud laughter echoing in his mind. Oh God, kiddo, why do you fall for that every time? He didn't hear them, though, too focused on catching his prey. His chase managed to wake up Slushy, who immediately went to assist him in his quest. They were both chasing the horrendous dot, only for it to slip from their grasp. It was infuriating. But then, it was gone? With a full-body flinch, Broccoli jumped back and looked around frantically, wondering how it disappeared so quickly. He heard something that sounded an awful lot like laughing, and he turned up to see the biggest shit-eating grin he'd ever seen on his classmate's face. Realizing what had just happened, and being filled with embarrassment, he growled at Shinso. His embarrassment only continued to grow when he noticed the teen lowering his phone, meaning he probably recorded the whole thing. When Broccoli's growl got louder and he took a threatening step forward, Shinso quickly put up his hands in a peaceful gesture. He was still grinning like an idiot, though, clear amusement shining in his eyes. Whoa there, easy, he chuckled, only for Broccoli to let out another unhappy growl. Was this a joke to him? Was he a joke to him? Did he think that just because he was small he couldn't fight? Well, he could. Toshi had taught him that. Defeating Stain had proven that. Broccoli wasn't useless or weak at all, and he would not be disrespected like this in his own home. He hadn't even noticed how close he had gotten until he noticed Shinso leaning away from him and practically pressing himself against the back of the couch. Wait, when did I even move up to the coffee table? Broccoli absent-mindedly thought, much closer to eye level with the teen than he was before. Shit, sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Really, I didn't. Yagi-san just said you liked that game, so I thought I might as well give it a try. To help cheer you up. You looked like you were having fun, too, so I didn't think... Anyway, I'm sorry, and I promise I won't do it again if you don't want me to. Shinso rambled, looking tense and sounding genuinely scared. Broccoli continued to glare at him, scanning him for any signs of malicious intent, but upon finding none, he tilted his head in a small nod and sat down on the table, still watching the boy warily. As soon as he forgave Shinso, the teen visibly relaxed. He even let out a deep sigh of relief as he slumped back against the couch. I gotta say, though, you're surprisingly fast. I've never seen a cat move like that before. It almost looked like you were glowing. Is that part of your quirk? Shinso continued, absent-mindedly. Broccoli tensed at the question. Had he used One for All by accident? He did a mental checkup and was relieved to find nothing was at least hurting. Still, him being a glowing cat was definitely not something he wanted Shinso to start talking about. Before he could even think about how to answer that, Broccoli caught sight of something moving across the room, and his eyes widened when he saw that it was Diagoro floating deliberately closer to Shinso, one hand raised into the air and a wide grin on his face. Meeting the ghost's eyes, Broccoli stood up on the coffee table and growled lowly while yelling in their mind, "Diagoro, don't you dare!" Diagoro, the idiot, just grinned wider and gave Shinso a firm poke on his shoulder, causing the boy to flinch and look around. "What the? There it is again," Shinso groaned. At that, Broccoli's head snapped back over to Diagoro. "Again? Wait, have you been intentionally messing with him while he's been here?" Broccoli asked, eyes wide with disbelief. And the rest of the vestiges, to his frustration, just chuckled. "Of course we have. We were bored and he was right here." "That is no excuse, and you know it," he growled, glaring at Diagoro, who once again poked Shinso's shoulder. The teen noticed his growling and followed his gaze. He was studying the empty space beside him while rubbing a hand over his shoulder. But then he slowly looked back at Broccoli, who completely froze at the calculating look in the teen's eyes. "Can you see them?" Shinso asked. Hesitantly, Broccoli nodded, feeling incredibly uncomfortable as the teen just kept staring at him. It was a similar look as the one Shota would give him whenever Broccoli or Izuku did something that made him suspicious of them. And it was freaking him out! He didn't need a mini Shota inspecting his every move. "Huh," was all Shinso said, his gaze flickering between Broccoli and the place beside him where Diagoro still stood and grinned like a dumbass. It was quiet for a while, neither saying anything as they just kept staring at each other. Surely he couldn't have figured out the truth already. He's only been here for a few days. Just as Shinso was about to open his mouth and say something, the front door suddenly opened, startling them both. "We're back. Sorry it took so long," Toshi called out from the hallway, sounding oddly happy. "Way too long. The damn rat wouldn't stop blabbering for hours," Shota grumbled, far less enthusiastically. Shinso tensed, glancing back down at Broccoli, who stared right back with equally wide eyes. Neither dared say anything or move. In the end, Shinso was the first to react, and he shot to his feet to greet the two adults. Broccoli hadn't even noticed how tense he had been, until the teen's back was turned to him and the cat finally let out a deep and relieved sigh. He followed the other into the hallway, each step faster than the last until he was running right into the arms of his dad's. "Welcome home," he thought with a purr, happy to have his small family back, with the exception of Shinso still being there. But for now, he could deal with that, as long as his dads didn't stop hugging him. Shota's point of view. They'd just finished eating dinner, and Shinso had offered to help Toshi with the dishes. Shota was only half listening to the conversation from where he sat at the table, his eyes on his phone. Broccoli was laying in his lap, purring like an engine, as if he had no worries in the world. Oh, what Shota wouldn't do to trade places with the cat, especially after the shitstorm that was today. Seriously, what was Nezu thinking? Shota shook his head, willing himself to just forget about that stupid meeting for now and not think about it. He could deal with that on Monday, when they tell the class. For now, he just wanted to enjoy this small moment of peace while it lasted. "So, does Midoriya live close by?" Shinso asked, carefully. At the mention of their student, Shota curiously looked up from his phone to watch the other two. Toshi hummed thoughtfully, before shrugging in response. "I guess he does live pretty close. Only a few blocks away from here, actually." "Why do you ask?" Toshi answered curiously. For some reason, Shinso frowned at that answer. "But he doesn't, live in this building?" "No, he doesn't. What made you think that?" Toshi asked, with a small frown of his own. Shinso glanced over at Shota, who just raised an eyebrow at the teen. He felt Broccoli tense where he laid in his lap, and he absent-mindedly ran a hand down the cat's back as he held eye contact with the student. The teen's eyes flickered down for just a small moment before he looked away with a shake of his head. "No reason," Shinso answered with a shrug. "Just thought
maybe he could join our training tomorrow since he is back in town and it's the last day. If that's okay? Shota squinted his eyes at the odd tone in his student's voice. Was he hiding something? But before Shota could ask, Toshi was already answering. That is an excellent idea, the blonde said with a brilliant smile. I'm sure that young Midoriya would love that as well. Should I give him a call? Now that gained Shinso's attention, and Shota felt like facepalming at the clumsy way his partner revealed such sensitive information. They were not supposed to just casually call students on evenings or weekends. Midoriya was just a special case. Even without the whole successor situation, they'd known him for almost 2 years now, and they honestly cared for the kid as if he truly was their own. Though Shota had a feeling that if they were to let Midoriya know about that, the kid would probably bolt. You have his number? Shinso asked, voice tense with rightful suspicion. Toshi tensed, looking panicked for a moment, before Shota jumped in to save him. Of course we do, Shota answered casually. Every homeroom teacher has the numbers for our students and their guardians in case of emergencies. He then turned to the blonde and added, and no need to call him. Just a text should be fine, considering how late it is. Right, Toshi agreed, a little too quickly. Before anyone could say another word, Broccoli jumped down from his lap and walked out of the kitchen without so much as a glance back. The little gremlin disappeared into the office, even going so far as to push the door as closed as he could. The sight had showed a huff fondly. The little guy had always liked his privacy. It was getting late, and they started getting ready for their last patrol for this internship, but not before Shota shot out a quick text to their other, more problem-induced student, asking him if he wanted to join their training tomorrow before the internships are over. Patrolling with Shinso was nice. Most of the patrols were spent in silence, except for work-related questions, which was fine with Shota. It was how he liked to work, and tonight seemed like it was going to be the same. Except when they reached the top of the first rooftop and Shinso decided to break the silence. So, Midoriya's quirk. Should have frowned at that. What about his quirk? He answered, trying to hide the growing unease in his stomach as they continued to walk along the rooftops. Again with him asking about Midoriya. Do you know how far it, reaches? At that, Shota stopped so he could properly look at his student. The kid looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with the edges of his capture weapon as he glanced between Shota and the ground far below them. I'm afraid you're gonna need to be more specific than that, Shota answered slowly, wondering what this was about. The ghosts. Do you know how far away they can be from Midoriya? Kid, I have no idea, Shota answered with a sigh. It could be 1 meter or maybe even a mile. I don't know. You're gonna have to ask Midoriya that stuff. He looked back at Shinso, who was frowning deeply at the ground. Why do you even ask? Did something happen? Shoulda added, worry growing in his chest. At first, it didn't seem like Shinso was gonna answer, but then the kid took a deep breath and spoke. I mean, kind of? Ever since Midoriya got back from his internship, I've been feeling the ghosts messing with me. That was certainly not what he had expected, and he let out a sharp, They've been doing what? Shinso flinched back and looked startled. Oh, has Midoriya not told you? The teen asked carefully, now back to looking unsure. Told me what? Shoulda asked back, feeling his patience running thin at all the surprise that came along with this damn haunted quirk. Why couldn't they go one goddamn week without something new showing up? Well, you see, after I used my quirk on him at the sports festival, the ghosts have been able to interact with me. Not speak or anything, but they will poke my shoulder and stuff like that. But they usually only do it when Midoriya is there, you know? I thought, I mean, I just assumed he told you? Before Shota could think of an answer to that extremely concerning matter, his phone buzzed and he fished it out. Well, when you speak of the devil, he grumbled, seeing it was a reply from Midoriya himself. Problem child. Of course! I'd love to join training tomorrow. If you're sure you're okay with it? I was planning on training by myself anyway. Of course he was, Shoda thought with a mental roll of his eyes and a small smile. This kid literally didn't know how to relax or take it easy. Aizawa. It's okay with us. I wouldn't ask you otherwise. See you at UA by 10 tomorrow then. Problem child. Yes! See you tomorrow. Good luck on your patrol, sensei. Shoda raised an eyebrow at that and typed out another message. Aizawa. How did you know I was out on patrol? For a moment, the kid kept writing and erasing his answer, the three dots appearing time and time again before he finally sent a reply. Problem child. Because you're an underground hero? And you have an intern who needs experience? It isn't that hard to figure out, sensei. Oh, and say hi to Shinso, by the way. Oh, and say hi to Shinso from me. Smiley face. Midoriya says hi. Shida huffed as he pocketed his phone. So he's joining us tomorrow? Shinso asked, looking almost hopeful at the idea of seeing his friend, despite the very concerning thing he had just revealed. Why do I always end up with the weird kids? Yes, we'll meet him at UA in the morning. Now come on, let's get your last patrol started. The kid faltered a little at the mention of last patrol, but soon lit up with determination, and then they were off. Izuku's point of view. Izuku was nervously pacing in front of the UA gym. He was there a bit early, having been scared of running into Shoda and Shinso on the way. Kiddo, can you please calm down? You're stressing us out over here. Diagoro huffed from where he leaned against the gym wall. Or more like he was posing so it would look like he was leaning against it. A bit hard to lean against something when you went straight through any solid mass. Don't tell me to calm down, Izuku hissed out. Shinso's been getting private training from Shoda the whole week, and he's probably amazing with the capture weapon by now. The one thing that only I had in common with Shoda. He's probably also gotten really good at combat, and Shoda will want to keep him instead. He got cut off with a yelp when someone hit him in the back of his head, and he turned around to see Second of all people glaring at him. Enough! I can feel you stressing yourself and therefore us out, and it's annoying. This ain't some dumb competition between you and Shinso, Second said sternly before turning away and continuing in a low mutter. Seriously, get over yourself. You literally have nothing to worry about, stupid brat. Izuku pouted at Second, still rubbing the back of his head. That hurt! But he wasn't about to admit that. I can think of quite a few reasons I should be worried, Izuku muttered back. Second rolled his eyes. Yes, reasons that your brain made up. Because why listen to us when you can listen to that big brain of yours? Second! Yuichi scolded, appearing out of thin air and putting himself in front of Izuku protectively. That is enough! Whatever. With a click of his tongue, Second was gone, having retreated deep into the quirk and sealing away all of his emotions from the others. He had been doing that a lot lately. It had gotten a bit better while they were together with Gran Torino, but ever since they got back home, Second and Third had gone straight back to isolating themselves again. It made Izuku sad that they still didn't find him worthy or whatever, or that he wasn't even someone they wanted to be around. Don't worry about him, Izu, Yuichi said gently, turning around and giving him an encouraging smile. Just focus on having fun while training today, alright? You're gonna do fine. Right, I'll try. Izuku sighed. Try what? Shinso asked from right behind him. Izuku squeaked and rolled around to see the other teen wearing a small grin on his face. Behind the teen was Shoda, and although Izuku couldn't see it, Izuku was sure the man was wearing a similar grin from behind his capture weapon. Instead of answering, Izuku shot Diagoro a betrayed glare. You were supposed to be on lookout, he hissed. Yup, Diagoro answered with a grin, looking way too amused for someone who just failed at doing his one job. I've been keeping my eyes out for any pigeons that might attack us. Very dangerous monsters, those things. You never know when they might strike. Izuku dragged a hand down his face and groaned. Whatever, he muttered before turning back to his classmate and teacher, who was watching him with varying levels of concern and amusement. Good morning? Thank you for letting me join in on the training today, he said with a small bow, unsure how to act around both of them. at the same time and outside of class. And especially since he now had memories of Broccoli wanting to bite Shinso's fingers off. Yikes. He'd made mental notes to be around his friend as little as possible while in his cat form, for everyone's sake. It's fine, problem child. Shoulda huffed. Now come on, let's get started. Just as they turned to enter the gym, Nana floated up to Shinso and ruffled the boy's gravity-defying hair, causing him to yelp in surprise. Nana! Izuku scolded. Sorry, Shinso. She just wanted to say hi. He apologized to his classmate. It's okay, just startled me, Shinso answered, dragging a hand through his hair. So they really can interact with Shinso, Shoda hummed, causing Izuku to freeze. With all the mess that's been going on lately, he had forgotten to tell Shoda about that. But before Izuku could think of what to say, Shoda was already continuing. Just make sure they don't distract him during training. And respect him if he wants to be left alone. Got it? The man gave the air a glare, and although he wasn't staring at any of the ghosts directly, Izuku still felt them shiver with fear. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at that. Dead or alive, it didn't matter. They still had respect for Aizawa Shota. It made him wonder just what the man could have done to inflict this much fear in a bunch of retired heroes. With a smile, Izuku ran to catch up to his dad and friend, excited to spend some time with them. They trained for a few hours, and Izuku wondered why he'd even worried so much in the first place. After all, it was like any other one-on-one sparring lesson, only much more intense and sometimes involving their capture weapons. Shinso got to try Izuku's capture gloves while Izuku examined his capture scarf. It was almost identical to the one Eraser had used, which was probably the point. After all, the only difference between Izuku's weapon and the scarf was that he wore it on his arms instead of around his neck. When they finally got a break, Izuku and Shinso both promptly collapsed on the floor. Izuku wasn't too tired. After all, he was used to even harsher training conditions on a sandy beach in every weather, but this had still been an intense workout. I'm gonna go get us some food from Lunch Rush. Will you two be alright on your own? Shoda asked, earning a thumbs up and a yes, sensei from both Shinso and Izuku. And that's how Izuku found himself being alone, as a human, with Shinso for the first time in a week. It was admittedly a bit awkward. He had no idea what to say or how to act around his friend, now that he had Broccoli's newly found resentment so fresh in his mind. They sat in silence for a long moment, and Izuku couldn't help but wonder if Shinso felt as awkward, or if it was just him. Not knowing what to say, Izuku started drinking out of his water bottle, and of course that was the moment that Shinso decided to speak up. So, you're ghosts. Can they, leave your side? 'Cause either you're stalking me, or I've gained some ghosts of my own. Izuku promptly choked on his water, and he coughed into his hand. Shinso didn't so much as flinch at his reaction. Instead, the teen was merely watching him, a neutral expression on his face, but eyes shining with amusement as he watched Izuku struggle to come up with some excuse. Well, that is. Izuku stammered between coughs, looking anywhere but at Shinso as he tried to think of what to say. I mean, yes? Not the me stalking you bit, but they can, leave? Izuku lied, hating himself more and more with every word that came out of his mouth. Just because most of his life was built on lies didn't mean he enjoyed telling them. At that, Shinso looked fairly unimpressed, and the boy simply raised an eyebrow at him. Really? He drawled out, resting his head on one hand. You don't sound so sure. Well, I mean, they kind of come and go. Which is true. They disappear into the quirk all the time. And I have no idea what they do or talk about when they are gone. Also true. They exclude me from their secret meetings. Have they, been bothering you? Izuku asked, already knowing the answer. A little, Shinso answered with a shrug. I'm sorry, Izuku quickly apologized, only to get cut off by Shinso raising a hand and silencing him. Dude, that's not your fault. I don't blame you for what your quirk decides to do. I just want to make sure it was your quirk and I wasn't going crazy, Shinso said, a small grin on his face. Seriously, we're cool. Oh, thank you. I'll talk to them. About leaving you alone, I mean. At that, Shinso let out a snort. Yes, oh man, please do that. I don't know how many random cold attacks in the night I can take. I don't mind them in school, but come on, a guy needs his privacy. Izuku smiled weakly at that, knowing that when Shinso moves out, he won't have to worry about being haunted anymore. Not that he could tell Shinso that the vestiges were connected to broccoli, not without revealing the truth. Speaking of broccoli, Izuku glanced worriedly over at Shinso, who looked much more relaxed. Did he who looked much more relaxed now. Did he really not know that he and broccoli were the same? Now that Izuku thought about it, maybe it was a bit of a stretch to think he'd figured it out just from the vestiges being there, especially if Izuku lied, told him that the ghosts could reach far distances. That was good, right? After all, it wasn't like Izuku wanted more people to know about it, so then why did he feel almost disappointed? They sat in silence once again, Shinso having pulled out his phone and scrolling through it, looking completely at ease. Meanwhile, Izuku was struggling with whether he should say something or not. There wasn't one thing that kept bothering him, but was it really his place to bring it up? So, are you getting along with Aizawa sensei? He asked carefully, fiddling with his half empty water bottle while he watched the older teen closely. While he watched the other teen closely. Shinso didn't react much and simply shrugged again with a small smile. Hmm, yeah, he's pretty cool. Pretty cool? More like the coolest hero, teacher, and overall person ever. And are you happy living with them, I mean? He pressed, shifting so he could sit just a bit closer as he watched Shinso's reaction. Shinso stopped scrolling, his thumb hovering above the screen as he turned to give Izuku a questioning look. I don't remember telling you that I was living with Aizawa sensei during my internship. Izuku flinched back and waved his hands in front of him. Oh, well, I mean, you two did arrive together, and Eraserhead is a solo underground hero with no big agency, so I just assumed he had his work office at their home, which would mean you would live at his place? Izuku trailed off, now unsure. Was it weird for him to know about their teacher? It probably was, wasn't it? Damn it. Now he's second guessing everything he did and said. Why did his life have to be so messy? Right, of course a hero fanboy like you would know that. Shinso huffed, sounding more amused than anything and making Izuku sag with relief. But yeah, it's been alright. Can't wait to go home, though. The purple haired teen continued with a small smile. Wait, what? What? Izuku squeaked, his voice cracking at the single word. Shinso gave him an odd look, and Izuku blushed when he realized how loudly he might have said that. He was just surprised. After all, he always assumed that Shinso was, well, like him. Not that he wanted Shinso to have a hard home life. It was just the vibe he got. Like they were the same. And then Shota and Toshi would adopt him, and they'd be a happy family. Realizing he'd stayed quiet for too long, Izuku cleared his throat and tried talking again. You're not gonna stay with him? At that, Shinso looked genuinely confused. His brows furrowed as if he couldn't fathom how Izuku had gotten to that conclusion. No, why would I? The internship is over after today, and I'll go home just like everyone else, he answered, giving Izuku another odd look. Why would you think I was gonna stay with our teacher, of all people? I just, I mean, you just seemed like you would be happy there? With them, I mean, him? Izuku answered quietly, as he shrunk into himself, now feeling very stupid for assuming something like that. Beside him, Shinso gave a small sigh before he laid down on the ground, staring up at the roof far above them. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is really nice and all, and has the cutest cat, the teen said jokingly, causing Izuku to let out a surprised laugh. Shinso grinned at the sound of his laughter, and continued. The other cat is super weird though, not gonna lie. I think the thing is actually planning to kill me in my sleep, he muttered, before shaking his head. Anyway, except for that, it's been great, but I do have a home to get back to. Besides, my moms would probably kill me if I suddenly decided to stay with Sensei just because he has a cute cat. Shinso then paused again, a thoughtful expression on his face. Though, now that I think about it, maybe if I use that as an argument, they will finally allow me to get my own cat? He chuckled under his breath. So, you're not saying? Nah, Shinso answered easily. I mean, had you asked me that 5 years ago, I'd probably have said yes. But I have a family that actually likes me now, and I wouldn't trade that for anything else. I see, Izuku breathed out, an odd sort of relief washing over him and just leaving him exhausted. I'm not being replaced. Are you okay? Shinso asked, startling Izuku. He hadn't even noticed how he had zoned out, but suddenly Shinso was sitting next to him, a hand on his shoulder and looking worried. Izuku, despite feeling disoriented, did his best to give his friend an encouraging smile. Yeah, I'm fine, just thinking, he said, having trailed off mid-sentence, as his brain just didn't seem able to focus beyond the heavy static in his head. Right, Shinso drawled, not looking convinced that he was, in fact, fine. So, any other reason? So, any reason why you seem so interested in my home life? The teen asked. Oh, no, sorry. I didn't mean to pry or make you uncomfortable. It's fine, Shinso paused, looking at Izuku in that worried way that made him want to crawl into a hole and hide. But what about you? I don't think you've ever mentioned your family. At that, Izuku felt like all of his blood simply froze, and he was suddenly very aware of how closely Shinso was watching him. He couldn't let him know about Inko or Hisashi, and certainly not about his dad's. He couldn't give away anything or else his friend would be worried or he'll call him a liar and he'll leave and tell everyone and then it was over. Thankfully, Shida chose that moment to get back. The sound of the heavy gym doors opening was enough to bring Izuku back to reality. With a harsh breath that turned into coughing because he had apparently stopped breathing, Izuku eagerly stood up and all but ran over to Shota to help him set everything up. Their teacher had seemed surprised, suspicious, at Izuku's trembling and pale form, but he hadn't commented on it other than telling him to eat. And if Shinso kept shooting him worried looks while eating, then Izuku chose to ignore it. He was fine. He had a family, just like Shinso had his. Even if they didn't even know about him. But it was fine because they love him just as he is. When he is what they want him to be. But among all the raging thoughts in his head, one of them stood out. Because if Shinso already had a family, then there was no reason for Izuku or Broccoli to have to worry about him taking his place. Maybe him and Broccoli won't have to become mortal enemies after all. Hitoshi's point of view. By the time Hitoshi arrived back at Aizawa and Yagi's apartment, he was utterly exhausted. Training with Midoriya had been fun, sure, but it had also been much more high-paced than when it was just him and Aizawa. Seriously, they had to force him to stop just long enough for them to eat lunch. Did the guy not know how to take a break or something? He glanced over at Slushy, who was purring next to him while he packed the last of his stuff. Shinso smiled at the sight of her, and he couldn't help but feel like Midoriya could learn a thing or two. From this relaxed little lady. Seriously, he'd miss this cat a lot. The other one, though. Shinso glanced over at Broccoli, who was sitting at the foot of his bed and staring creepily at him. While the cat still wasn't friendly, by any means, he also wasn't downright hostile, so Shinso guessed that was an improvement. He couldn't help but wonder what had changed between now and this morning, though. Maybe the cat understood that he was going to leave in a few hours? Did Broccoli want to make sure he actually left or something? It felt a bit weird being stared at by a cat like he was a prisoner that needed to be kept an eye on, especially when the eyes were filled with so much intelligence that they seemed almost human. There was a knock on the door, and Aizawa stepped in. The man's gaze landed on Shinso, Slushy, and lastly, Broccoli, at which he raised an eyebrow at the small cat. I see you are all still alive, Aizawa joked dryly, earning a huff and an eye roll from Broccoli before he turned back to staring at Shinso. Anyway, we were gonna eat dinner soon. You got everything ready for when your moms come to pick you up? Shinso nodded. Yes, I've got everything. Thank you again for letting me stay here this week. It's no problem, Aizawa answered, only to get cut off by a small ball of green crashing into his leg. The man stared down at the meowing cat, looking overall unimpressed. What, you want up? Broccoli gave another meow and nodded, looking ready to climb Aizawa's leg. The man just huffed before picking the cat up, who wasted no time curling up in his arms and purring loudly. No matter how many times he saw his teacher interact with the cats, it never failed to surprise him. It was such a complete 180 from how he was around school that it almost gave him whiplash. Not to mention Broccoli's complete change of personality, too, whenever the dark haired man was around. It was clear they cared about each other. Aizawa let him know when let Aizawa let him know they were going to eat dinner soon, before turning to leave the room. Before the door closed behind them, though, Shinso saw Broccoli glaring at him. Or, well, not at him, but rather at something just over his shoulder. As if on cue, Shinso felt something cold poke him in the back of his neck, and he flinched before whirling around to give the empty air a frustrated glare. He really meant when he told Midoriya. As nice as it was to have a friendly cat like Slushy around, it would be nice to go back home where there were no weirdly aggressive gremlin cats or ghosts haunting him. Just a few more hours, and then he'd be back home and away from this madness. So why did he have a feeling that something was about to change? Author's notes. It's been so long since I worked on this story. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. Please be kind in the comments. Any guesses on what decision Nezu has made? Cookies will be given to everyone who gets it right. Hint. It's been mentioned before that I'm going to move around the timeline a little. As much as I love the idea of Shinso and Nizu being brothers, I also like the idea of Shinso, for once, having a good foster family that isn't a new A teacher. I was thinking of having him be adopted by Shota and Toshi, but decided against it because I wanted Izu to be their only child. The Class 1A kids are all still their students and kids, but Izu is their problem child. No one can replace that. Thank you, everyone, for your continued patience, comments, and support. I'm unsure whether the next chapter will be up. I'm unsure when the next chapter will be up, but hopefully it will never take this long again. I really enjoyed writing this chapter and hoped you all enjoyed reading it too. Just know that I will never drop this. I always come back. I always come back. Sorry. Next chapter, we'll get more Shota and Nezu point of view. Plus, Izu going back to school. Anyway, hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone. And that's the end of chapter 30. Sorry, I ended on the William Afton bit at the end because I had to. I'll always come back. It's such an iconic line. Like, what? You can't tell me the author didn't do that on purpose. Okay, maybe the author did not do it on purpose, but still, it was funny. Anyway, please show the original author Texilia some love, and please leave me some comments. By the way, I have some people to shout out because I finally got hate comments. So, shout out to Phoenix C. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And shout out to Haley Gray X8X. Thank you so much for the hate comments. And I'm asking everybody here, please give me a hate comment and I will shout you out in the next video. This is gonna be my quirky thing. I'm gonna be weird about it. But yeah, leave me hate comments. Specifically hate comment. I don't want to see one happy comment. Okay, well actually, I do like seeing happy comments. They make me happy. But so do hate comments because I've been asking for hate comments and so now they make me happy. And that's my strategy. Because now that I ask for hate comments, if anyone ever sends me an actual hate comment, it can just be part of the bit. It can just be part of the bit. Isn't that great? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, pups!